In Colombia, the bilateral, national, and temporary ceasefire between the government and the ELN comes into force as part of the outcome of the Havana Peace Accords. The 9th India, Latin America, and the Caribbean Conclave began in New Delhi with the participation of delegations from Venezuela, Cuba, Mexico, and Chile, among other countries. And also in Niger, people demonstrate in support of the military government and against the foreign interference, coinciding with the Independence Day on Thursday. Hello from the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. This is from the south. I'm your anchor Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Haiti, the health ministry informed on Wednesday that the country reached 809 deaths due to cholera, an infection that re-emerged last October and affects all the departments of the country. According to the source, at least 58,859 people presented symptoms of diarrhea, vomiting, and dehydration. From October to date, more than 52,000 people required medical assistance and were hospitalized to treat their symptoms, while most of the deaths were registered in the health centers. At a press conference, the Director General of that entity, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, warned that there is a risk of outbreaks of other diseases such as TB, measles, or poliomyelitis, and while its health services suffer serious shortages. On Thursday, the bilateral, national, and temporary ceasefire for 180 days between the state of Colombia and the ELN comes into force in Colombia by virtue of the agreements reached at the peace talks in Havana, Cuba, on the 9th of June. A monitoring mechanism compounded by representatives of the government, the war force, and the UN verification mission will be implemented. This Wednesday, the Security Council approved the expansion of its mandate and, to this end, authorized an increase of up to 68 additional international observers to the mission's current strength. The government and the security forces previously warned that the truce does not imply a halt to the obligation to preserve the national territory and guarantee the order. As well as in the first ELN commander, Antonio Garcia, explained that during the 180 days of the ceasefire, the guerrillas will maintain defensive operations to preserve the security and integrity of the force and its territories. Let's move on to Brazil. The president of that nation, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, on Wednesday said that next week's summit of Amazon region nations will seek to draw up a common policy for the first time to protect the rainforest. At a press conference held in Brasilia, Lula said that they want to prepare a joint document of all the countries that have forests so that they arrive united at the COP28 in the United Arab Emirates. The 8 countries of the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, ACTO, will meet on August 7th and 8th in the city of Belém. The summit will focus on forest conservation and security along the borders, Lula said, adding that private businesses will be asked to help with the reforestation of 30 million hectares of degraded land. ACTO was created in 1978 to promote the preservation of the Amazon basin and regulate Amazonian development through cooperation. Its members are Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Peru, Suriname, and Venezuela.
For the first time, we want to prepare a joint document of all the countries that have forests, so that we arrive united at COP28 in the United Arab Emirates, and that we can have a very serious discussion with the rich countries, which, since 2009, have promised to release $100 billion to create a fund to help maintain the forest and preserve biodiversity. And that this money has been given, it has been so dispersed, and nobody has noticed. Therefore, I have high expectations from this meeting, after which, for the first time, we will have a common policy for action in the Amazon, a common policy for economic development, taking into account the reality of each country, a policy to combat organized crime, to combat drug trafficking.
Also, the Brazilian president, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, affirmed that the BRICS Development Bank should be more generous than the International Monetary Fund. He also said that the BRICS financial institution should serve the development of the poorest countries with adequate financing and promote financial policies to end the great inequalities that exist in the world, promote fairer mechanisms for trade. He also stressed the importance of incorporating new members, with Argentina and Saudi Arabia as possible candidates. And the Argentine government categorically rejected on Wednesday the maneuvers carried out by the United Kingdom in the Malvinas Islands and reiterated the sovereign rights of that South American country over that overseas territory. This time, it was a new edition of the military exercises called Cape Bayonet, which bring together different forces that are part of the military deployment of the illegal British occupation in the islands, according to a statement issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in that nation. It also assures that such actions constitute an unjustified show of force and a deliberate departure from the numerous resolutions of the United Nations Organization and other bodies. These documents urge Argentina and the United Kingdom to resume negotiations to find a peaceful and definitive solution to the sovereignty dispute involving both countries. And the 9th India, Latin America and the Caribbean Conclave began in New Delhi on Thursday with the participation of delegations from Venezuela, Cuba, Mexico and Chile, among other countries. Organized by the Confederation of Indian Industry, the event brings together ministers, senior government officials, leaders of regional bodies, industry experts and business persons. It aims to explore new avenues of collaboration, trade and investment between India and the Latin American and Caribbean region. In this context, the Executive Vice President of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, indicated that she will offer the Indian business persons present at the conclave the great investment opportunities that Venezuela has as to see the exportable offer. According to official figures, trade between both regions is around $50,000 million during the last year. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find the news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. In the United States, hundreds of asylum seekers are sleeping outside the Roosevelt Hotel in the city of New York, awaiting an answer to their asylum application. The facility has become a reception center for those awaiting an answer to their asylum application, while local officials are asking the federal government for help in dealing with the migration crisis. New York State has an executive order requiring authorities to provide shelter for the homeless. Migrant families have occupied every room of the hotel, and hundreds more have had to sleep on the street for days at a time. The facility has also become a center where the poor can access vaccinations and food. New York City Mayor Eric Adams called the immigration crisis a disaster and warned that the city's resources are stretched to the limit. A City Hall spokesperson said on Tuesday that the city's 194 emergency shelters and intake centers are full.
We need help, and it's not going to get any better. From this moment on, it's downhill. There is no more room. I was at the Roosevelt on Saturday, and I went there on Sunday. Lined up around the block, hurting the businesses there. This is not going to get better.
Right? I can't make that up. We are seeing 2,300 people a week still coming into New York City seeking shelter. That is unsustainable. My opinion is that people are coming from other parts of the United States when the doors are closing in Denver, when the system is full in Chicago. People say, let's go to New York City because we know that New York City will provide migrants with food and shelter and the things that they need. So that is what I think is happening.
In other topics, the Pope Francis said on Wednesday that the anguished cry of clerical sexual abuse victims must be heard as he began a 5-day visit to Portugal for a major Catholic youth festival. The 86-year-old Panif was welcomed with military honors in Lisbon, where 1 million pilgrims from around the world are expected to take part in the World Youth Day festivities. The event, a week of religious, cultural and festive activities held about every 3 years in a different city, comes as the Church reflects on its future and grapples with priest pedophilia scandals. A report released in February in Portugal by an independent commission concluded that at least 4,815 children had been abused in the country since 1950 by clergy members, mostly priests. Francis, whose direct and spontaneous style has proved highly popular with young people, is expected to meet abuse victims privately.
And this is often accentuated by the disappointment and anger that some people feel towards the Church, in some cases because of our bad reference and the scandals that have marred its face and colors to a humble and ongoing purification, starting with the anguished cry of the victims, who must always be accepted and listened to.
In Russia, the President Vladimir Putin presented state awards in the Kremlin. The President highlighted the work of the Russian servicemen who demonstrated heroism and courage in performing combat tasks during this special military operation. Furthermore, the President stressed that such events bring together outstanding citizens, honorable and extraordinary people whose achievements have a special value for the country. On August 1st, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu awarded state honors to the crew of a tank that single-handedly defeated the combat brigade of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Zaporizhia region.
I also want to address the families of our comrades who will never come in person for these higher state awards. I want to be heard here, from this solemn hall of the Kremlin, by all my colleagues throughout the country and at the various levels of the government. These are our families, and their children are our children.
And teleSUR English launches its own videos on demand site for you to go and revisit our interviews, the top stories, the special broadcastings and more. Just go to the top left corner in their website homepage and click on the video option to access our VOD platform. And now we will have a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Niger, people demonstrate in support of the military government and against foreign interference, coinciding with Independence Day on Thursday. Supporters of the so-called National Council for the Safeguarding of the Homeland and the civil society groups gather in Niamey, the capital of Niger. Amid rising anti-imperialist sentiments, the rally coincides with the 63rd anniversary of the Declaration of Independence of this former French colony. Organizers of the protest stated that the immediate departure of all foreign forces still remaining in the country has been requested. The leader of the de facto government, Abdurrahman Tiani, expressed his rejection to the sanctions imposed by the countries of West Africa and affirmed that he will not yield to the threats of the military intervention. Also in Niger, General Abdurrahman Tiani, leader of the coup junta, said in a televised speech that he rejects the unjust and inhuman sanctions imposed by the West African countries against Niger and warned that he will not give in to the threats of military intervention. In his second public appearance after the July 26 coup d'etat, Tiani addressed the nation in a speech on the occasion of Independence Day. During his speech, he condemned the economic and financial sanctions imposed by the countries on the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, against Niger. He said that these measures were aimed at humiliating and impoverishing the people of Niger and criticized the bellicose attitude of ECOWAS, which last Sunday gave the coup junta a week to restore constitutional order without ruling out military intervention in case of failure to do so. Tiani also stated that the coup had the support of the people and the conditions are being created for general elections to be held soon.
We are surprised, like the overwhelming majority of the people of Niger, by their eagerness to condemn the seizure of power by the National Council for the Safeguard of the Homeland, to impose sanctions against Niger and its people, and to put a de facto end to their security operation. For our part, we believe that human life is sacred, the life of Nigerians as well as that of all our brothers and friends living in Niger. They, therefore, have no objective reason to leave Niger.
And Niger's new military ruler also criticized what he called illegal, unjust, and inhumane sanctions imposed by ECOWAS and other bodies in the region on the African nation, and accused them of disregarding the country's sovereignty.
With regard to ECOWAS and WEMOA, Nigerians were stunned to learn of the illegal, unjust, and inhumane sanctions imposed on them. A military intervention will come in the coming weeks to give the coup de grace to the regime of the National Council for the Safeguard of the Homeland. As you can see, nowhere in this contemptuous and bellicose attitude have the leaders of ECOWAS and WEMOA taken into account the sovereignty of our country.
And during his nationally televised speech, the coup leader called on an open dialogue of all parties concerned to guarantee a peaceful transition and a general election.
Out of duty to the people of Niger and awareness of the seriousness of the moment our country is going through, we have always remained humble and attentive to all the parties concerned and open to dialogue, so that once the emotions have passed, we can work together to create the conditions for a peaceful transition that should lead, within a relatively short and reasonable time, to general elections, but, above all, a better approach to our fight against terrorism and other economic and social evils that undermine the development of Niger.
On Wednesday, West Africa's regional bloc said a military intervention in junta-ruled Niger was the last resort, as Nigeria cut electricity supplies to intensify pressure on the country's coup leaders. A week after a coup rocked the fragile nation and former colonial power France began evacuating its citizens, Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS leaders on Sunday imposed trade and financial sanctions and gave the coup leaders a week to reinstate Niger's democratically elected president or face the potential use of force. ECOWAS has vowed to take a firm line against coups that have proliferated across the region since 2020, most of them under the pressure of a bloody rebel insurgency. Always stay in the topic. The countries of the West African regional bloc, known as ECOWAS, imposed trade and financial sanctions to pressure the military to return the country to a democratic control. A week after the coup d'etat in Niger and only a few days after some of these landlocked West African countries' neighbors imposed sanctions to punish the coup plotters, the population is beginning to feel the economic effects. The markets are still full of goods, but shoppers said food prices are already going up, making the problems worse. Banking operations are mostly closed, and ATMs have reportedly stopped dispensing cash. Abdulaziz Seini, an economist at the University of Niamey, noted that if these countries decide to close their borders, there will be an impact on the socio-economic life of Nigerians.
We used to buy this 25 kilograms bag of rice for $17, often even $16. It went up at some point. We were buying it for $17, $18, but today we paid $23.
We know very well that we trade with bordering countries, since we're not a country with direct access to the sea. Everything we order arrives at the ports of neighboring countries, and from these neighboring countries we have to transport it to Niger. So if these countries decide to close their borders, frankly, there will be an impact on the socio-economic life of Nigerians.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.